All right, Mark and Grace here with the Real Marriage Podcast. Before we jump in, and today's question is going to be, how do you know which school to send your kids to? So it's kind of summertime, and you got to kind of figure out, what are we going to do when school rolls around in the fall? So before we jump into that, we would love it if you would give us a great review.
5-star.
5-star, yeah. If you want to give us a nasty review, just do it in your heart. Don't do it on the internet. And especially on Apple, they say it would be super helpful, and maybe some sort of review. Give them an example of one that was recently posted.
Yeah, this one says, so helpful. I listen to this while I work, and my husband does as well. And so many episodes have been so vision changing to us. Thank you both for being real and trying to help marriages in a world that is a mess.
It is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It is a total dumpster fire meets prison riot in America and around the world right now. So if you'd like to leave a review, we'd sure appreciate it, especially help us out on Apple. So we have 5 kids. So we're talking about how to know what decision to make for the education of your child. We've got 5 kids. 2 are married. 2 are now in college, and 1 is finishing up high school. So we've been through everything from kindergarten to grad school with the kids. Mm-hmm. And so, especially when the kids are little, this decision is pretty massive. Maybe tell them when we moved to Arizona, kind of what a crisis this was for us.
Yeah, we had elementary, middle school, high school, and college when we moved here.
Yeah, we moved here not knowing anybody, knowing where we would live, where we would work, not knowing where the kids would go to school, and it was a mess.
Yeah, I did a lot of research, but it's just hard to know until you're there. And schools here fill up quickly. And so if you're in a state where your good schools are filling up, you want to get on this, because oftentimes you need to register in February for your kids. But basically, I sat down and prayed and started doing research, and the options, are that you can do private school if you can afford it. Here we have tax help. They supplement, and there's
a lot more school choice here. There's what are the equivalent of private charter schools.
Yep.
For those of you that don't know as well, in Arizona, you can take the first, I think it's $2,000 of your taxes, earmark them toward a nonprofit, and you can even do so toward a Christian school to help lower tuition. So Arizona is not like a lot of states. A lot of states have got heavy public school unions, and everything's kind of locked down. So your options are public school, a private Christian school, like I said, if you can afford it, a private non-Christian school, so more like a prep or a vocational school, a charter school, which usually may have some tax dollars, and it's kind of a hybrid oftentimes between public and private, and or homeschool. And you can do co-op with that, and there's a million creative options in the homeschooling environment. And what we saw during COVID is a lot of parents are not sending their kids back to school. We've seen an explosion in homeschooling. Mm-hmm. And so as we were looking, what were some of the driving forces in our conversations about how to make this decision?
Yeah, we kind of made a vision statement of what things we wanted to accomplish with school for our kids. And whatever decision you make, you need to know that you still need to homeschool a bit, because you need to be interacting with your kids about what they're learning, even if they're in a private school, and really discussing that part of it so that you are educating your kids as well. With your own principles at home. But we really had to kind of put a vision together of what do we want our kids to learn at school and not learn?
Yeah. And you bring it up, like it says in Ephesians 6, fathers, train your children. I think in the original Greek, it's in the paideia, and that is the whole upbringing and raising of the child. And so the Bible doesn't hold the government accountable for the well-being of your child. It holds the parent accountable. And in some states, the government has really tried to overtake parental rights. They're indoctrinating children. If you are in one of those bright blue places where the sex education starts in kindergarten and it's mandatory, and they're celebrating Pride Month, and kids can undergo, gender transition without notifying their parents. I mean, we're now in a world where education has been weaponized.
Yeah.
And people who can't have children, they want to brainwash our children. And I say that in our day, sex is a religion, LGBTQIA are denominations, and what they now have is evangelists that are trying to convert kids. And now that religion of sex and gender ideology, it's gone into children's ministry. So we pastor a church, we have a kids ministry. Well, the perverts in our country have now gone into kids ministry, and they've decided that they would start at your local school with a curriculum. And so Grace is absolutely right. Wherever you send your child, you have to be actively involved. You need to know who their teachers are. You need to see what the curriculum is. You need to know what the rules of conduct are, and then you need to be praying with them, discipling them at home, having them in a good church community. Because is it true, honey, that even if you send your kids to Christian school, doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to be Christian?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's been some books and different discussions that have come home as I've asked the kids what they've learned for the day that we would not allow in our own home through the years. And so then we end up dialoguing it because they've already learned some of it in the classroom. And so we end up dialoguing what is true about it, what's false about it, what's heretical. And so then they learn how to think for themselves and not just what to think. So yeah, you still have to correct things. No school is perfect.
Yeah. And when it comes to the choice, so the Bible talks about educating a child, but there's principles and methods. And the principle is, kids need to learn. The method is, how do you do it? And what we would encourage you is don't get legalistic.
Right.
And legalistic is when you take the principle and you only allow one method. And if that's the case, the more children you have and the more years you have to educate them, the more pain you're going to cause yourself. And so you got to make the decision per child, per year. Different kids have different needs. And sometimes people come along and be like, well, public schools are ungodly. You should never use a public school. And I would say as a general rule, I'm not going to argue with that. But let's say you've got a special needs child that really needs
all the programs,
certain medical attention or certain physical therapy. And there's a narrow list of places that they can actually be educated. If you're a legalist, you won't even consider those, but maybe you should. If you say, well, hey, we only always do homeschool. Like us, we had 5 kids. How many of them do you think would have done well in homeschool? How many do you think would have not done so well?
I mean, maybe 2 would have done well in homeschool and the rest of them probably wouldn't have. And that's a whole nother topic because, boys need interaction in sports or other group type activities, and you can't always provide those in homeschool.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the homeschool families will create co-ops and networks and set up, specialists and teaching different subjects. And so that world is very creative. And and a lot of people in our church, that's the route that they have gone. So you mentioned, honey, for the couple to get on the same page, because this can be a tension point.
Oh, absolutely.
Because let's say, for example, you're kind of legalistic and you're like, we only homeschool. And mom's like, I'm dying. I got a bunch of little kids. Maybe I had a tough pregnancy. Our house isn't set up for it. Our budget doesn't allow, the kind of, get a housekeeper to help mom out or something. And so then mom's like, you're putting all the burden on me. On the flip side, if you're like, well, we just got to put them all in private school. You have a bunch of kids, dad could be like, man, I'm dying because I got to generate, an incredible amount of additional revenue to make ends meet. And so it's not just about the educating of the children. That decision
the health of the family
is the health of the marriage and the family. And so a lot of people are like, well, we need to do what's best for the kids. I'd say you also need to factor in what's best for the whole family and what's best for the marriage. And so maybe even explain for them when we first moved to Arizona, how as we were looking at the options, the schedules for the kids weren't going to line up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we couldn't get all the kids into the same school. So we were potentially looking at 3 different schools for 4 kids because our 5th was in doing her college years and gap years. And so we had, potentially 3 different schedules and, drop-offs and pickups and vacations.
And holidays.
Yeah. And we looked at each other. We're like, no, even if this is the only option, this can't be what we do. This would wreck the family dynamic. It would not be healthy for our marriage. It would not be healthy for our kids. It would be chaotic. And so we just kept praying, okay, Lord, we would like to have our kids in one school, if at all possible, if that's what the Lord wanted. And we felt like that was, And so he did. He actually miraculously opened a door. So leave possibility for the Lord to work. He miraculously opened a completely full waitlisted school for our 4 kids in a way that we couldn't have done. And so, we were willing to look at charter and public and, Christian, but I knew I couldn't homeschool. I am not homeschool material, and it would not be well for our kids or our marriage or ministry.
Some moms are. I mean, our oldest daughter runs Real Faith, has got a master's degree in teaching, and she's for sure going to homeschool her kids.
Awesome. Yeah. I appreciate women that can. I just know that that's not me. And so the reality of that for me was part of the decision.
What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean to act like a man?
There are many places in this world that are here to help men. What's worse, most churches nowadays are run by guys you could knock over with a stiff breeze.
Is it okay for a woman to make more than a man?
Absolutely, I think. Okay, are you a man?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, then describe yourself.
I'm the breadwinner, and he is more of like the stay-at-home type.
I know he takes on a lot of more quote-unquote feminine roles.
Same thing with women. I'm pretty sure there could be women that could be men.
It's more of like patriarchy that's like the thing.
To act like a man, I don't think there's like generally any way that anyone's supposed to act anymore.
How in the world are we supposed to know what it means to act like a man? Been waiting more than 30 years to write my first ever men's book and help you learn how to act like a man. So within that, honey, how many couples and or individuals put a lot of pressure on a couple like this is how you have to do it? Because once people choose some method for their child and it works, sometimes they're really enthusiastic for it, which can be good, but sometimes they get legalistic and pushy about it. And is there pressure on a mom from some of the other moms on how to do it, quote unquote, the right way?
Absolutely. I mean, moms already feel the pressure of just being a mom. But I think that's why you need to be willing to go around to the different options and kind of pray through and research each one and determine, take the ones off the table that absolutely are not a good fit for your family, and then pray about the ones that are still on the table. And
you talked about, we set kind of our priorities, and there's kind of A, B, C level priorities. The A is like, we have to have these. And B is, we would really, really like to have these. C is, it would be good, but we could flex either way. And so on our list, on the A level, it was, as you heard, like from a schedule perspective, we can't have 3 different pickup, drop off, holiday, vacation. That's just not going to work. On the A level as well, we were not going to send our children to a secular public school. We wouldn't do it. For us, that was an A level. Like, one way or another, the Bible, prayer, Jesus, the Holy Spirit is going to be involved in the day-to-day. You and I both went to public school. It wasn't awesome. And
it also wasn't very safe.
It wasn't very safe. And it hasn't gotten better since we were there. And so for us, an A-level priority as well was, marriage, family, life, and ministry. And you didn't want to homeschool. You didn't feel like you were equipped to homeschool. And if I put that on you, it would have cratered our marriage, because it would have taken 100% between homeschooling and ministry. There would have been nothing left. Because as a ministry, and you got to factor this in too, like, do one of you travel for work? Are you gone a lot? That may mean homeschooling is a lot better because it's flexible, or it may be really painful because you got so many little kids that without some help and a break. So, and this is where the decision changes per child per year. Different kids are different. And every year, the marriage and the family's got a different set of dynamics.
Yep.
You may have a kid that gets, diagnosed with some sort of learning disability, and you're like, they need a special tutor. They need a special program. Dad loses his job. Now we can't afford the private school. Mom has an illness or an injury. She was homeschooling, but now she's bedridden. I mean, what we're wanting to give you is just a lot of grace,
Flexibility.
flexibility and freedom.
Well, in some families, they'll send, the oldest child to private school and then homeschool the other younger kids, or, they do different dynamics within the family, whatever works per kid, because sometimes kids are, struggle with the whole school dynamic and need more time to adjust and adapt to that. And so sometimes they need to be at home for a little bit to kind of grow and mature, and then they can be in a bigger environment.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with individual children too, as they get a little bit older, sometimes certain kids really slot into specialized education. Some kids are like, they need to go into a STEM program because they're just whiz-bang smart kid and in science, engineering, technology, and whatever else it is. I'm not smart enough to know what STEM means. Some of your kids are going to be, incredible athletes, and sports is not the most important thing, but it's like, they're an incredible athlete, and sports is a big part of their life. And
we
that's
have equestrian school here.
Yeah, there's equestrian school here.
Aviation schools. I mean, really determining what your kids are gifted in and maybe focused on and want to do in their future. There's a lot of options out there. So it really does take a ton of research and prayer and coming together and really praying even with your child and saying, what are your gifts and abilities, and how do we want to help grow those in a positive way?
And so our encouragement too would be every year you make the decision, and every child is different, and hold it all in an open hand. And if it's not working, make a pivot. Like, and when it comes to education, like, kids are going to school and then they're home on the computer. And, statistically what we knew going in, if you're a parent, and what we know coming out is putting a little boy in front of a screen is not going to result in an education. It'll result in an incredible series of video game competitions and maybe a fantasy football league, but he's not going to learn anything. He's not going to do anything. And so, a lot of parents, I think, were forced in the more recent years to, number one, they're more aware of what their kids are getting taught. Because if, let's say, you're doing remote learning, now the kids aren't at school, the laptop is open on the dining room table and you're hearing the lecture. Now you know what's going on.
That's right.
In addition, I think it gave parents permission to re-envision what education could look like because people got out of the normal flow. And that could be a really great thing. I think just totally online learning for most kids is a proven disaster. And so whatever you do, they're going to need social, interaction and relationships and all of that. But we would say, hold it in an open hand, and you may pick a school and it may work great for one kid, and for another kid, you're like, they're getting bullied. There's a whole series of issues.
Absolutely.
They don't have any friends, or the mean girls are just making their life painful. There's even if you pick the right school, teachers change, administrators change, curriculum changes, kids change.
Especially right now, curriculum changes.
Absolutely. And so, education, even if you picked a school, it may not be the same school 4 years later. It may not be the same school 4 months later.
Yeah, educate yourself about where you're educating your children.
Anything else that you would give them as we wrap up, just to think and pray about and consider?
I think that you should, again, allow your child to have, depending on their age, but allow them to have a voice into it so that they know that you're going to continue to interact about their education as they go, so that they will talk to you about what they're learning and not just sending them off and then not saying anything after that. And so I think it needs to be an open dialogue. You ultimately make that choice. You make that vote. But I think helping them have a voice in it so that they know you care and you care about what they're learning, it's a big deal for a child to know that.
So when it comes to parenting, we talk a lot about a view, a voice, and a vote. And what do you give the kids a view of? Like, guys, here's what we're doing. Do you give them a voice? Hey, we want you to speak into this. Do you give them a vote? They get to help make the decision or make the decision for themselves. When it came to education, We gave them a view into all the options. And then we gave each of the kids a very strong voice. And then we voted. But I remember we took one of our sons who was going to head into high school to we went and toured and visited a lot of schools, and we let the kids go with us and just kind of looked around. And it was a very, high ranking, very large high school. He walked on campus. He's like, I will not go to a high school this large. I'd rather be in a medium-sized school, maybe 400, 500, 600 kids in the high school. I don't want 5,000, 6,000 kids in the high school. He's like, I don't want to go to a big school. Okay, we want to hear that.
Yeah.
Our kids pushed back, and they're all like, we want to go to a Christian school. We want to have Bible, prayer, worship. That's very important to us. Like, okay. Our oldest daughter, when she decided to go to college, she went to Arizona State, and then she got her master's in the Barrett Honors Program, completely secular. And she's an evangelist and an apologist. And so she's arguing in every class, and she's at the prayer tent, and she's leading Bible studies. So her faith is very strong, and she goes there like, I'm going to go. I'm a missionary going to a bunch of lost people.
That's right.
But if you have a kid who's very weak and wavering in their faith, and they're not strong, that could crater them.
Absolutely.
And so again, it's per kid per year. And so with the kids as well, giving them a voice, the boys articulate, they're like, hey, we love playing baseball. We want to have a school that has a good team. We want to compete. That's how we make our friends. That's kind
Learn
of our
integrity.
social outlet. That, that's where we learn to obey rules and submit to authority. And so, our boys have been on some really good, like, state championship run baseball teams with all their buddies who are Christians.
And if there's a great school that doesn't have that, you can do club teams. So again, there's
You gotta
so
figure
many
it out.
different ways.
Yeah, you got to
Just
figure
be
it out.
open and do your research and pray.
But how important is it that the couple just come to a full, even at some point they need to come to a decision, but how important is it that the couple owns the decision?
Crucial. Yeah. I mean, again, it's okay if it's the wrong decision or a decision that only lasts for a year, but you got to own that decision and then follow through with it.
So any decision you make as a couple, you've got to own it together. And it can't be, oh, I hate my school. Yeah, your mom made you go. You can't.
Exactly.
You got to own it together. It can't be, hey, I want to drop out. Well, your dad's, demanding it. You need to own the decision together.
Yeah.
And once the decision is made, you need to present a unified front to the kids. Okay. You want to pray for them?
Sure. Dear Lord, thank you that you do have options for us and that you don't just have restrictions. But Lord, I just pray that these parents would have wisdom, that they would come to you for wisdom, and that they would be unified in this decision, and that the kids would be able to be in that process with them. I pray that you would open the possibilities for them where they would like to be. And Lord, just help them to be creative with the options, but to be able to do their research and know exactly from you where they need to have their kids. In Jesus' name, amen.